Let us do it to it.
Do it now. Do it good. All right.
Let's
That's it.
kick this pid.
It's done. It's done. I think we're live, Jake. How do you feel about that?
Indifferent.
How do you feel about them apples?
No, I feel good about them. All of them. Every single one of those apples I feel good about.
That's good.
I feel as good as a barrel of apples.
Hello, Facebookians, and
Hello.
welcome
Facebookites.
to Facebookites. Welcome to the pouch. I am Greg Savage. Beside me is
Jake Farwharton.
and we're going to be doing a live broadcast of our little podcast called The Pouch, which is where we deal with Australian news and politics.
Not so seriously.
Absolutely.
That's how you say not so seriously when you're trying to be not so serious.
That's right. It's all in the tone, Jake. It's all in the tone.
And the timbre?
Yes, the timbre, which is also important.
Very important to people who listen to timbre.
Okay, that's it. That's all I got. I'm mucking about with the Facebook settings because this is not something that I have done before. So that's all I got.
Yeah.
If you got some comments, leave them below. I cannot guarantee that I can see them, but I will try and track them down if I get a little notification saying that we're good to go. All right, Jake. How's your week been?
My week has been really good.
Yeah.
It's been a productive week. I worked all week this week.
That's huge.
Having not worked all week for several weeks with while my wife gets better from her little illness.
Yeah.
So it was good. It's good to be back at work. I'm still working from home.
Are you?
Which is lovely. I do my 10K every morning.
It's a bit out of fashion now, Jake, the old working from home.
I know, but it just so happens that as I was ready to go back to work this week, we got a notification from the building manager saying that very major works are occurring in our building. And,
very major.
They're very major. They are encouraging people to work or to make alternative arrangements to work from home as much as possible. So it worked out.
Yeah, I think a few businesses kind of did that sort of stuff. Like they sort of thought, right, well, if there's people working from home, I know schools did it, so it makes sense that that other workplaces, without giving too much away about where you work, Jake.
Yeah. Well, yeah, a lot of people did. I mean, the works in my building were going on a little bit before COVID, and they just they tamped down, they simmered.
Whoa.
During the COVID period, and then they restarted as everyone tried to get back into the office. But They're very noisy, not productive.
No.
But how about you? How are you? That was a lot about me, Greg. How are you going? How is your week?
That's really what I want this podcast to be about, Jake, is you. You know, I just want it to be about you. I'm great, man. I'm great.
Your hair first, because it's a masterclass in hair styling.
Really? My hair?
Yeah, it's great. I love it.
Well, we couldn't top your hair last week, so I thought, I may as well just shave half of mine off. May as well just shave half of mine off. Now, I haven't actually hit the go live button, Jake. This is where some of the confusion is coming from. So we're not live at all. None of this has been documented by anyone.
That's right. That was boring.
So we get to go again. Because I just went onto our Facebook page and I was like, oh. We're not
live.
Yeah. Okay. This looks a bit better. This looks more like what it's meant to look like if we were live. And now we are live, Jake. So, hey, hello, Facebookians. Welcome to the pouch for the second time this morning. Jake and I have been chatting for about...
Yeah. The first time for them. Second time for us.
That's right. Jake and I did a little trial run, apparently, for about half an hour.
Yeah, it's very important to get your trials in and do a solid job of really trying it out.
But it certainly makes sense, and it means that I can close down a fair few of these windows. Now, people are getting notifications, Jake, which is wonderful. I have a beautiful large window up now, which means that I can see comments, I can see you, people can see us, which is wonderful. It just feels nice, It
feels nice. It feels welcoming.
How
It
was your
feels
week,
feels like
Jake?
home. Oh, my week was good. It was a good week. It was a productive week, a happy week. Yeah, it was an active week. How was your week? Was your
Oh,
week
look,
good?
yeah, my week was great. My week was great. I hear you're still working from home.
Still working from home, yes. It was interesting. It's my first full work week back at work after my wife has recovered from an illness, and I had to take off some time to work with her, but or to be with her. And so first week back, and I was meant to be in the office. Alas, there was very noisy works going on, and we were discouraged from entering the office. So yes,
Yeah.
still working very much from home.
It's very last week, Jake, working from home. Like, I don't
It
know.
is.
I don't know if you got the memo.
Yeah.
Look, I do
I
think
did
some
actually
people,
get the memo. The memo told me to continue working from home.
yeah, well, according to the traffic now that's building up when we're driving to school, other people haven't got that memo. Look, it's great to see you, and nice work looking after your family during these times as well. I've always said that. Coronavirus is happening around all this other stuff that probably would have happened anyway. And so people are dealing with their little crises as they're going through the weeks while dealing with the coronavirus and while having that be all over the news. Who knows what sort of news items we might have missed out on.
Yeah, only 10. I think. Only
Yeah, we're up to
10
10.
news story. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I had 9, so I'll just
Look,
adjust that. My list.
that's close enough. When you can't, when you're at the school fete and you do the jelly bean counting competition, it's if there was 10 jelly beans in there and you got 9, unless somebody else got 10, you would have got it. You would have won, Greg.
Do you remember? Were you involved in that? I won a jelly bean.
That's right.
Counting
I remember
competition.
that.
Yeah, so I won a jelly bean counting competition because a lady was trying to raise some money for her daughter who was in a wheelchair.
I do remember that.
And we had the iFriends going. You had the iFriends going. I don't know if it was imaginary friends or iFriends at the time. And we ended up going, look, maybe we can do something for her. And I think we raised like $3,000 or something.
I think it was something like that. Yeah.
She got a full blown wheelchair out of the situation. I completely forgot about that.
How about that? We were doing good before it was cool.
We were. That's a nice thing to do. I do remember that. Yeah. And because we were worried because we thought we'd get like $50 or something. And it ended up being thousands of dollars. And we were just a bit like, what are the legalities here? What do we do? I remember going to the bank and being like, I want receipts for everything, and I want the video footage that I was here. I want how much I've taken out from this account. I want records of who put the money in there, where this money is going. I want a receipt. And then I had to take it to another bank. It was just insane. But anyway, someone got a wheelchair out of it, so that's really great.
I remember that. How about that? That's very funny. What a happy memory.
Lots of people donated to that. Maybe that's something we can look into later on. Jake, we better get started.
We had better.
Weekend is going to vanish, and we won't have anything to show for it.
As if it hasn't already.
That's right. Look, it's a beautiful day here in the Blue Mountains, so very, very happy to be doing this. A big week, and let's make a start. You ready to do this, Jaco?
Oh, I'm so ready to kick this pig.
Kick the pig?
Yeah, it's a real saying.
Is it a real saying now because you've said it, or is it?
It's a real saying. It's been there forever.
Right.
Let's kick this pig.
Okay. Well, let's kick this pig.
I told you, it's a real saying.
Yeah, it rolls off the
Everyone's
tongue.
using it now.
Yeah, it really rolls off the tongue. Okay. Hello, and welcome to The Pouch, the relentlessly ticking fan of podcasts that aims to take a not-so-serious look at the week in Australian news and politics. I'm Greg. Oh, so that's what my backyard looks like, savage.
And I'm Jake. Look, if I was the Minister for Kitty Cats during a kitty cat COVID crisis and there was a kitty cat COVID crisis Senate inquiry, I'd probably make a point of memorising the statistics far Wharton. I was really worried about being able to say kitty cat COVID crisis, but I did it on purpose and it worked out fine.
Did you practice it?
I didn't. No, that was all off the tongue. Yeah. On today's episode, it was all off the script, I should say. But on today's episode, we talk branch stacking, the colonialization,
the canonisation,
the canonization. On today's episode, we talk branch stacking, the canonization of the vaccination, and so much more.
And Jake, while we're as snug as a bug in this proverbial rug, I want to know, what's your personal definition of a hotspot?
Spoiler alert, if I'm there.
Oh, man.
Sorry.
I'm so glad that was G-rated this week because it took me a long time to figure out how I was going to edit in last week's joke. I'll give you the tip.
It was a great one.
It was so good. It was so good. No one will ever know. They might be able to have a guess, but no one will ever know. Okay. Now, Jake, I want to start this week by talking about a little news story that might have got missed had I not quickly saved it over into our script. And this was this idea that people are getting seeds, unwanted seeds delivered in their mail, which I thought was quite peculiar. Obviously, in the middle of a pandemic, people are sort of hypersensitive to these sorts of weird and wonderful things that might cause any sort of illness. And I think there was some concern that that's what these seeds might be. But I don't know if you had a chance to have a look at this one. Did you get a chance to see what this is all about? Why people are getting seeds delivered in the mail?
I haven't figured out how or why,
yes.
Or apart from that somebody has sold them or given them to them,
or
sent them to them. But yeah, no, it's a bit wonky. It's really weird. But it's been going on for a few weeks.
Yeah, that's right. I think there's about 46 people in Australia who have received these seeds. Now, the idea is that if I'm an Amazon seller, and particularly overseas, I will create a buyer's account under your name, Jake. So I'll use Jake Farwharton, and then I'll buy the seeds under your name with your address. So you're a genuine seller, you're a genuine buyer, and then those seeds will actually come to you because Amazon thinks that you are the one who actually bought the seeds, but really, it's my seed shop, and I'm the one who bought the seeds under your name. So that way, I get more sales. I can also create, like a review account, so I can go in and review the seeds, and I can say these seeds are like 5 stars out of 5. Although meanwhile, you just get some seeds in the mail, which coming from overseas, probably not such a great thing to plant in an Australian garden.
No, yeah, we do have biosecurity issues with certain plants and other things. But yeah, well, that's really interesting. So nothing really nefarious in terms of the why.
The data. So it's all about the fact that they've actually got your data and they've got your address.
Exactly where I was going. Yeah,
they know where you live.
Yeah, that's wonky. That's really wonky.
Yeah. So anyway, it's pretty weird. So little packets of seeds. Apparently, other things like it's called brushing. This is
which makes sense.
Yeah,
people are receiving seeds anonymously.
And
it makes sense
brushing.
That they would come up with a name like brushing.
Maybe it's brushing your data. I don't know. But people are getting things like toothbrushes, hair ties, cleaning products, even seeds. Yeah, look, I wouldn't encourage it, obviously, but if you're going to send me cleaning products and toothbrushes and stuff, I'll be like, all right. Don't have to buy them off Amazon anymore. That's good.
That's really weird.
That's
weird that Amazon has allowed. I mean, they must have had some form of data breach. It's weird that they would enable access to that sort of information.
Yeah, I suppose it is. It's considered a criminal offence.
Yeah,
but obviously, being overseas, there's nothing you can really do to stop it, according to the article in the ABC.
Right. Well, after this show, I'm going to delete my credit cards from Amazon.
If your personal details are out there, then they can be used for years, according to the ACCC. Your data could even be sold multiple times. Victims of brushing should report it to the marketplace they received the parcel through, such as Amazon. You can also report it to the company that made the product, but sometimes that can also be who sent it to you. So you can report it to the company who sent it to you, which is nice.
Thanks, guys, for sending me that product that you clearly fraudulently acquired my address and name in order to send me.
Yeah, I'm sure they're the type of people who, if you ask them nicely, will stop.
Yeah.
Now you got a little story in here, Jake. A little warm-up story.
Yeah, I thought it was a little bit funny. KFC have said they are no longer. It is official. They are no longer going to refer to themselves or refer to their food as it being finger-licking good because, essentially it is, quote, the most inappropriate slogan for 2020 to be promoting the licking of one's fingers.
I think It is inappropriate. I don't know if it's the most appropriate. I reckon. I reckon you could,
Yeah, the most
Anyway,
inappropriate still remains being
it's
sick and traveling.
yeah, that's
or
right.
being sick and being outside of your house.
Yeah.
But
If
I mean,
it's
certainly it's up there. It's up there with inappropriate things.
I think if it said something like KFC, the equivalent to coughing on someone else on a train, the
Yeah.
food equivalent to coughing on someone else on a train,
Yeah.
that would probably be a little more inappropriate.
Yeah, I agree.
But it is maybe for a chicken company it is a bit inappropriate. Pretty weird, isn't it? How these sorts of things can start to take on new meanings during COVID crises and things like that. Finger licking good. That's no good. It reminds me of that the health minister who got up when the pandemic first started and said, don't touch your face, like practice good hygiene. And then was licking her fingers to turn the pages of the sheet she was reading from. Anyway, that was back when we still were laughing. Okay. Let's get into a little bit of nitty-gritty news. Now we've just invented a new segment, Jake, called the warm-up. I like that. The warm-up.
Well,
in the
are
pouch.
you warm yet? Are we going to continue warming up?
Well, I those two little stories I was thinking. So we have a new segment called the warm up.
Yeah,
because we're in a pouch.
Yeah,
and then you can go right. Let's get into the nitty gritty.
Yeah, we're gonna have a cool down though as well. Then
cool down, perfect. This is great. I'm writing these ideas down. Jake. The warm up, cool down.
Yeah,
it's great. It's great. Okay, so now we're up to over I think we ticked over about 100 people or over 100 elderly individuals dying in aged care facilities in Australia since the pandemic started. We've just ticked over 600 people in total dying from the pandemic. 100 of those, which let me do some quick maths, is
300.
Is 1/6 of the people in aged care facilities. So this has been a huge story over the last couple of weeks, and this has been, there's been blame games, Jake.
It's been really interesting because the federal government maintains. They are responsible for aged care facilities. Period.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
Okay, well, I've been trying to look into this, and it's got such a sordid, weird history, our history of aged care in Australia. There's a really great documentary podcast thing on Rear View. ABC do a podcast called Rear View, and they did an aged care one this week, and they sort of did a lead-up of how we got to this point. Now, I couldn't follow the whole thing. It's one of those podcasts where I need to go back and listen to it again. But it really spoke about how... we started with the nursing homes and nursing homes, started off with nurses in them. Gradually over time that changed. They were no longer obliged to have nurses in them. Then it just became sort of staff members and that sort of thing who were there. So they stopped receiving these sorts of really high quality, I shouldn't say that. I should say that they stopped receiving people who needed nurses couldn't get access to nurses as easy as what they could, is what I should say.
Well, I suppose if you were in a high dependency area of a nursing home or aged care home, you would still have access to medical care. It would just it could potentially not necessarily be as much as what would exist in, say, a hospital. Caring for that same number and type of severity in terms of their patient load. So, okay. I mean, and as you say, like this has been long-standing, and for one of those, this is among the many reasons, I suppose, that we have an aged care royal commission going on at the moment.
Yes.
Because essentially it has been bad for a very long time. With that said, we still have a lot of people in aged care homes, and it is, it is important to recognise that it nobody is saying that we should shut down aged care homes right now and have everybody in hospital, although that is
Yeah.
something that, particularly in other countries, off the top of my head, it might have been Sweden that, or no, Sweden's got the let her rip strategy. It was one of the European countries. Unfortunately, I can't recall which, but when coronavirus first hit that country, they got all of the people in aged care homes into hospitals, and they were able to minimize the death toll significantly.
Right.
We've had 328 deaths thus far in aged care homes. That was as of Monday this week.
Okay.
So it's quite a significant number. But in saying that, it's not necessarily a large percentage of the patients living in aged care. But
Okay.
either way, in terms of responsibility, the federal government has responsibility for aged care. That's a pretty solid premise.
Yeah.
The other side of this is, and the way that the federal government have been pushing back, is by saying that the state government has responsibility of public health emergencies. So while the federal government has responsibility over the aged care homes, the Victorian government should be taking responsibility for the, essentially all things during this public health emergency within Victoria.
Okay.
Now, if that confuses you, Greg, that's good, because it confuses everyone. And as a consequence, the federal government have been, firing shots at Dan Andrews, and Dan Andrews has been pushing back relentlessly, saying this is ridiculous. How did you not have a plan for this for this thing? We heard several reports this week saying that if you become ill, if you contract coronavirus, you have to immediately contact this federal government, this federal health department registry, and then nothing happens of that notification. So you can continue to go to work. You you might be a temporary employee, and you might stop you might stop your employment at a particular place. You've already registered that you have the COVID virus, but you might go on and work another 2 days, 3 days later at a different aged care home.
Yeah.
And there doesn't seem to be a tremendous amount of information flow from that registry to each of the aged care homes. So it's a really wonky system. Clearly, it seems to be broken. And when questioned during a Senate inquiry this week, the aged care minister, Richard Colbeck, he had great issues with being unable to recall how many people had died in aged care, how many people had contracted COVID in aged care. He had great difficulty reciting how what the systems that they've got set up in order to support particularly aged care homes in Victoria and New South Wales, where there are active clusters.
Yeah.
It's been really, really wonky. And then during the middle of the Senate inquiry, he just got up and walked out.
Yeah.
Now sorry, go on.
Yeah, he's under a lot of fire this week. I know that there was media following him around saying that, Scott Morrison has basically kept you out of all the decision-making processes now. I mean, look, it was such an own goal, wasn't it? I mean, it was such an easy... he was basically handed, how to do a good job on a platter, and he really messed it up. And for the fact that Scott Morrison is actually trying to, get himself out of this little pickle for apologising and all that sort of stuff, to have his aged care minister, coming up with so many blunders along the way, I don't know. It's not looking. I'm not this huge fan of, if a politician makes a mistake, they should be fired, but. I mean, if you're the aged care minister and you don't have these basic facts and you don't have this sort of basic empathy, I don't know. It's not. What do you think? I don't feel like it's looking great for him.
It's not. There are certain things that are expected of you, particularly in a Senate hearing, particularly in any sort of, parliamentary sitting. There are things that are expected. Even questions on notice. You can say, look, I'm sorry, I don't have that in front of me. Let me get back to you in the next couple of minutes. I'll source that detail. I'll provide it to you. But this is one in this Senate inquiry. There was an expectation that he would be asked these specific questions.
Well, so he would just know that he would be going home at night and going, right, what do I need to follow up on, right? Okay, like some basic facts, like what has he been doing?
Well, and that sort of thing, and I don't profess to have any great knowledge about the inner workings of a federal department, but broadly speaking, a minister is in charge of a department. Right? In this case, it's the aged care department.
Yeah.
And there are a whole range of bureaucrats within that department, all of which are providing information up, and he's providing direction down, or he is providing direction and advice, etc., down. And the fact that he would have had a media advisor, he would have had a political advisor, he would have had a whole bunch of these people around him that would have said, these are the types of questions that you're going to be asked, and these are the things that you need to have at hand. The fact that he didn't have that sort of stuff at hand, that really shows something. I'm not sure what that something is. It shows, either a disconnection from the facts, a disconnection from the seriousness, or that he's not listening, that I don't know, but it seems wonky. It seems really, really bad.
It does. And, again, this is the point of our podcast, right? We don't profess to be political analysts or anything like that. So two average people having a discussion about this, and it just doesn't feel right. It does, and when you break it down, you go, okay, he's actually an employee of the people. He's not employed. Right. And like you said, he's got all these staffers around him too. So he's getting paid through tax dollars. They're getting paid through tax dollars. You would that we have this certain level, we have a certain expectation that you're going to have all this information there, that you're actually actively working to make this a better system. And if you don't have these numbers here and you don't have this empathy here, what on earth are you doing with your time? Scott Morrison did actually apologise for some failings of the system, specifically around workforce shortages. He said that, I'm sorry that if people, there had to be removal of staff very quickly, and you're scrambling to find those particular staff, replacements. He said that that's not good enough. So he has apologised for some aspects of the aged care system falling short in some regards. He says on some days. On the days that the system falls short, on the days that expectations are not met, I'm deeply sorry about that. Of course I am.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but he does sort of specify a few things here and there about that. I know that Anthony Albanese has certainly come across as quite a bit more authoritative on this. They've certainly pounced on this like a kitten on a
ball of yarn?
On a ball of yarn. Great. Sounds good. And I was going to say on a kitten, on a chicken. So yours was much better. And they've pounced on it, and he's come up with an 8-point plan, or some 8 suggestions around that, and been quite saying, right, well, if Liberals are going to appear to be quite unauthoritative on this particular situation, let's jump on it and let's make it look like we are authoritative on this particular situation.
And in terms of strategy and tactics, it seems highly appropriate that when the government is lacking in strength in a particular area, that the opposition could and should probably exploit that area, particularly if they can be, direct in, pointing out the specific failures, the specific areas of failure related to how COVID has been able to, shoot through these aged care facilities. I've seen also defence from people like Alan Tudge this week. I think it was on Insiders. He was asked, questions about how COVID has been able to proliferate so badly through aged care facilities, and he essentially responded saying that, look, this is a Victorian problem. It's thankfully the interviewer immediately responded and said, well, what about Newmarch House in Sydney? What about other facilities in New South Wales? Like, this is the point. This issue it goes across state boundaries, and it's for that reason that aged care is the responsibility of the federal government. Again, there's no surprises here as to why we are having an aged care royal commission. It is clearly dysfunctional. The federal government has never been particularly amazing, and this is any federal government. It doesn't matter who it is. They've never been particularly amazing at administering programs, which is why they devolve responsibility for programs through funding to the states. Health, for example, they give a huge budget to the states. The states carry out those things so that they can localize it. What do the people want? We'll customize it to those people in that state, etc. Whereas aged care seems to be one size fits all, and at this moment, the one size doesn't fit us.
No, I agree with you, and it's one of those things too. But I suppose I wanted to pose this question to you because whenever a question about the numbers of deaths in aged care comes up, say in Parliament this week, there was this regular habit of saying, well, I don't think we should be politicizing it. I don't think you as the opposition should be politicizing the deaths of these individuals. This is a really tragic event, blah, blah, blah. What does it mean, do you think, to politicize something? Like, shouldn't it be politicized? Isn't it already politicized? Like, isn't asking that question in question time fair when it is the responsibility of the government to look after these aged care facilities? But when does it become a fair question? What's the line between a fair question and politicizing it?
I would say any time that involves cross-agency, cross-border, or cross-state boundary, it is entirely, and particularly during a public health issue, it is entirely appropriate to politicize it, because that's when you can point out systematic failures. Probably when it's inappropriate is when it's, one private provider, and that one private provider, had done everything that they possibly could. But, within that, there was, say, one or two staff members that did the wrong thing, that didn't follow procedure, et cetera. That's when, you can probably point to, after an investigation, that specific one was not a systematic failure of the guidelines, of the procedures, of et cetera, et cetera. They were all following infection control. They were all following, all of the appropriate things around that.
Okay.
But when it is multiple aged care, sorry, Siri's talking to me. When it is multiple states, when it is multiple aged care facilities, when it is during a public health emergency, and when we had known issues with that industry prior to COVID emerging, and you're able to point to specific systematic issues, that's when it is entirely appropriate to politicize it. Because that is absolutely the case here. Like, there are failings on multiple levels here that have led to the deaths of individuals. Some of the stories coming out from families, particularly, where there is just a profound lack of communication, where on one, in 1 minute, a family member calls up and says, "Hey, how's my parent doing?" And the nurse says, "Oh, look, I'll call you back. We're just slammed." No answer. They end up calling back later and they're saying, "Oh, look, he's fine." And then the person gets a phone call from a local hospital saying, "Look, your parent's here. You need to come in. Things are not looking good." Like that is so sad and harrowing.
Yeah.
And there's not one case of that. There's multiple.
Yeah.
So and that's when, to answer your question specifically, or directly, that's when it's entirely appropriate to politicize things, because it is inherently political. All of these failures relate to a political failure.
Because it's interesting, isn't it? Because you've got this meme at the moment where the politicians will say, "Well, I don't agree with the with the foundation of your question," or whatever it is. I don't. Yeah, that's it. I don't agree with the premise of your question. And it seems like this. Oh, well, I can't believe that you're politicizing this particular situation at the moment, given all of the harrowing deaths that are happening. It seems like that's a bit of a. It seems disingenuous. I think it comes across as disingenuous to me, anyway. But it does make you think about what is where is the line, and where do you start to become not sensitive to the families who have lost the loved ones during these times as well.
You're entirely right. There's no simple answer to this whatsoever. I'm just grateful that the Royal Commission was able to alter their alter what they were looking at to include the COVID, the response to COVID, so that we can ensure that we're learning lessons from the introduction of a pandemic to our country, during these types of circumstances.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, another little story that sort of that poked its head up during the week, like a mole chasing a golf ball.
Yeah, okay.
That's all I got.
I think they chase dirt.
Well, that's the thing. I don't really know what moles, like a gopher, chasing a golf ball. It popped its head up for a second before it realized it got a glimpse into the matrix and was like, whoa, this is not good. Went back down. And this branch stacking made it back into the headlines this week, Jake, for a few minutes. And this time, not the Labor Party, but the Liberal Party. And we had Victorian Liberal power broker and former Vice President Marcus Bastian, is it?
Yep.
Has resigned.
Bastian, I think it is.
Bastian he resigned from the party following a Channel 9 reports about alleged branch stacking.
Yes.
Who is this guy?
Well,
why is he stacking branches?
Yeah, look.
And are those branches from national parks, Jake? Because if they are, that's going to make me even more angry.
Well, they are from national parks, Greg.
That's it. I'm writing that down.
I'm as mad as a gopher chasing a golf ball right now. Yeah, look, this was a really, really interesting. So it's not quite the same smoking gun that it was, a couple of months back when we discussed the case of Labor branch stacking. Yeah. I mean, that was an amazing investigation. Tracked over a couple of, I think, several weeks, multiple recordings, voice recordings and video recordings, text messages, emails, etc. Yeah. That was a big, well-formed case. This one looks a little bit, less of a smoking gun than previously, but essentially it surrounds the premise that the former vice president, the Victorian Liberal power broker Marcus Bastian, essentially directed taxpayer-funded electorate officers, so people from the state electoral commission, to recruit members to the Liberal Party in order to boost their factional numbers. If he was on the right, on the conservative side, he would be recruiting people to the conservative side of his party in order to stack, decisions that were made in the future. And they were actually working. These people were working within the federal MP Kevin Andrews' office at the time. Right. So it's a really unfortunate thing. Michael Sukkar as well has been implicated. Yes. He's the Assistant Treasurer and Housing Minister, and he was also named in the reports. It's not necessarily alleged that he's been actively involved in stacking the Liberal branches, but essentially the reports allege that he has benefited from it. So I didn't direct them, but I may have gotten something out of it, Yeah,
a little bonus, little kicker.
Exactly. And he may not have actually known about it whatsoever.
And we do need to stress that this is not actually illegal.
Well, this part is, okay, because
yes,
essentially...
but not that other part.
So the issue
the part where they come from national parks is now, yeah, Jake, I am just going to digress 1 second before we get to the nitty-gritty of the illegalities of this situation. I want to bring something to our conversation here, just about the smoking gun. So if we can say it's not a smoking gun, but more of a dripping water pistol, how's that?
Greg, I love that so much.
It's good. It's good, isn't it? I'll write it down.
That's really good. Yeah. We got to use that. I think as we go through our shallow wades, when we bring forward our dripping water pistol, that's really good. I love it.
Look,
so
that's
much.
The thing, isn't it? So we don't do deep dives on this show. We do shallow wades. There's no smoking guns. It's just dripping water pistols.
I love it so much. This is great.
Great.
This is great.
Excellent. Okay, I'll put
We're
that in.
joining dots all around here. Yeah, look, the illegality relates to a point or to directing taxpayer-funded individuals to undertake activities for the party, essentially,
Right.
instead of doing their job that they were hired to do on behalf of the taxpayer, i.e., to deliver services, etc.
Yeah.
So that's where the illegality, or that's where the fraudulent behaviour comes in here. So it's not necessarily, it's not illegal at all if those people were hired by the Liberal Party, by the Liberal Party in order to sit in Liberal Party offices and to make phone calls on behalf of the Liberal Party to get new members. That's not illegal. But when for example, are they members of Kevin Andrews' office? Are they members of the Assistant Treasurer's office? And are they then being directed not to deliver the job that they're appointed to do, which, they are funded by the taxpayer to do, but instead they're calling people and saying, hey, you ought to become a member of this party because it's real great and stuff.
Okay. All right. Well, anyway, it's very disappointing to see that these sort of behaviours are occurring, but it's nice to see that someone has resigned. Heads have rolled, Jake.
Yeah.
Heads have rolled.
Heads have rolled, and heads probably will continue to roll. There is still this question around Kevin Andrews, around Michael Sukkar.
Yeah.
So there'll probably be some further investigation into it. But yeah, look, I should say, yes, Mr. Bastian was on the conservative side of politics because he's accused of targeting social and religious conservatives over several years in Victoria.
Now, if I was one of these people, I'd be certainly hoping for some other news to crop up in the news cycle to make sure that could be distracting. I wonder if there's anything else in the news that might be able to distract us from all these little nitty-gritty things that happen in our politics.
Definitely
Jake,
nothing else happening in Victoria, no.
Now, it took me a little while to come up with this one, Jake, but I called it the canonization of the vaccination. What do you think?
I love it.
It's pretty good.
Yeah. Except, of course, the religious leaders that we'll talk about in this particular story, they're against it.
Yes, that's right. But they want to.
They're more interested in the excommunication of the vaccination.
Damn it! See, this is why I need you, Jake. The excommunication of the vaccination. That was infinitely better. I actually had to Google TIN words associated with religion.
I love it.
Yeah, excommunication did not come up, which is unfortunate. Now, this story is about a letter, an open letter that was written, voicing concerns about the fact that, now, if I've got this right, some of the cells that they use to test the vaccine come from unborn children.
Well, from aborted fetal cells from
Yes.
like the 70s.
Yes.
This
But
is.
does it matter when they come from?
Probably not.
No. Like if you're against abortion,
Yeah.
and you wouldn't want people to be doing this because it sort of adds a bit of a positive slant on the idea of abortion. And in fact, if you word it a bit differently, it actually puts a positive slant on the idea of a human being being used for scientific research.
So so you're absolutely right to question the ethical nature of this, because it is an ethical question, or
Yes.
a moral question, I suppose. I wonder whether, and while you're sitting in this devil's advocate position, I wonder whether I can pose this to you, because these aborted fetal cells were harvested from someone in order to freeze them. So to create a bunch of, they take away a bunch of eggs, they take away a bunch of sperm, they combine them in order to do IVF, in vitro fertilization. Can't say fertilization today. And what happens is you will implant a number of fertilized embryos into the mother, and you will then, if there are still some fetuses that have been implanted, they will often just discard them. So you're talking about a bunch of discarded fetuses that weren't going to go ahead. This isn't a an occasion of a mother and a father loving each other very much, and undertaking what mother and fathers that love each other very much do, and then aborting that resulting fetus and then using the cell lines out of that. This is the process that occurs during IVF, where you fertilize a bunch of eggs and you implant a bunch of them, and you don't implant a bunch of them. And the ones that you don't implant, you can't freeze them. So you would, invariably you would just discard them. That's the nature of this. It is using things that were going to be discarded anyway.
Okay.
I don't know whether that changes your mind or anything.
Well, it's probably more about the fact that, I guess if I was them, I would probably take it one step back and say, well, that practice probably shouldn't be occurring either, if that's the case. But I don't know. That might be a rabbit hole I'm not comfortable going down, just because of my lack of knowledge with the situation. I suppose I'm just trying to figure out the philosophical nature of it, because I didn't know that that's where some of the cell lines come from to be tested for vaccination. So in a way, I kind of appreciate this information being brought to light so that people can make a decision based on their own views about it. Because the more information we have, the better. I don't know. It was interesting. My sort of knowledge stopped at the point where they said, not my interest, just the research that I was doing, if you can call it research, I was just Googling things, about, when Oxford said that they actually have to pass a very highly ethical process. And I don't know what that highly ethical process is, but regardless, if you have a view that that a fertilized cell is a human life, then there's no real sort of ethical argument that you could make, which would suggest that it's okay to harvest them, like you said, or anything like that. I don't. It's sort of it really does boil down to the question of whether or not those.
You're okay with that?
Yeah, that's right. And so I don't know what the ethical standards were for Oxford. Do you have any ideas about that one?
Look, it's multifaceted. Part of it is the acknowledgement that fertilized embryo, that fertilized fetus rather, is unable to live outside of the body and will never be implanted. It is going to be discarded, one way or the other. Either it's used for good, and I would refer to vaccines, to medicines, to cell lines that are used to, discover new drugs and new therapies. I would discover them as a tremendous net good. And as a consequence, I would suggest that, it is perfectly reasonable to use aborted fetal cells. The other side of this is that they are, bound by strict ethical guidelines. So, when you apply to create a vaccine and specifically to use a cell line that occurred from part of an aborted fetal cell, you have to say, this is exactly what I'm going to use it for. And as part of your, you will have to submit your proposal to an ethical board. That ethical board will be made up of a scientist, of a medical practitioner, of a lay person, of a religious person, and of other people. So you've got this wide, I suppose, philosophical and strictly scientific and layperson lens being put across. So essentially, you've got somebody there to answer the pub test. Is this, just for the good of humanity? You've got a religious person there to say, is this being used in the most appropriate way? You've got the scientist there to say, this is good science and it's going to be used in order to improve the lives of humanity, etc. So look, they answer those types of questions around that premise of, is this ethically okay?
Yeah, which is interesting. So I guess one of the arguments that I heard this week was that, why bring this one up now? There are other vaccines that we have already put into place in Australia that are already part of our, routine vaccination schedules that have the same testing regime. Why pick this time now to choose this one? And I guess if I was inclined to be against it, I would say something along the lines of, well, okay, I will then.
Yep.
I'll make my argument across the board. I don't think any of those vaccines are. And now that all of this information is out in the open, and we have some hint that you would be able to not not have to get the vaccine on religious grounds, well, then maybe other people aren't going to be getting other vaccines now based on those particular religious grounds, and based on the belief that those cells constitute human life, and that they shouldn't be using those to find the vaccinations or to test the vaccinations. So, yeah.
I mean, when it comes down to it, when we're talking about vaccines like the MMR or the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine and the chickenpox vaccine, they were all created using cell lines that included aborted fetal cells. They're no longer they're no longer manufactured using aborted fetal cells because they've had the time to work on that created vaccine in order to essentially they've had time, they've had space, they're wanting to refine the vaccine, etc. With this new vaccine, we want to do it as quickly as humanly possible. And part of that, quickly as humanly possible part apparently involves a little bit of human tissue. And, the reason they use human tissue instead of any other tissue or instead of any other synthetic thing is because human tissue reacts like the thing that you're about to inject it into, which is the human. And it will react in a similar way, like aborted human cells aborted fetal cells will react in a similar way when presented with that virus. So essentially it's using us in order to test on us prior to testing on us. So it's an incredibly important thing. And there's nothing saying that, down the track, once this vaccine or these vaccines have been created, that it may not be necessary in the future to use aborted fetal cells.
Yes. Okay.
As the foundation. But at this stage, it is necessary in order to accomplish what, essentially is a once in a generation. Across the world, we have this massive crisis, and this massive crisis might be able to be addressed through a vaccine that includes cells that were going to be discarded anyway. To me, that's sort of the utilitarian view, which is generally always by perspective the utilitarian view of, look, we're using stuff that was going to be tossed in the bin. Do you want us to not toss it in the bin and therefore not get a vaccine? Or do you want us to toss it in the bin and not get a vaccine? Or do you mind if we use it a little bit? We'll give you a vaccine. We'll save the world,
Yeah. And I suppose, I wonder if there's an argument to be made that even if you are of the understanding that this is a human life, and that it probably shouldn't be used, but I mean, if we don't get vaccinated, then that costs human life as well. So, I don't know. That's a tricky little thing that's just
I don't know.
In my head. Yeah.
I have we're moving slightly into
highly opinionated territory.
Highly opinionated and controversial territory. Yeah. I have very, very little empathy for people who don't vaccinate on supposed ethical or otherwise grounds. And that's partly that is because I have a wife who can't get vaccinated because she's immune suppressed, and the vaccine will likely have no impact on her ability to fight the virus. Whereas what will have an impact on her ability to fight the virus is not being exposed to it because the so-called herd has immunity. That essentially we have enough vaccination in the population. I think it's somewhere around the 92 to 95% of the population who are vaccinated, which essentially means we should have no community transmission. Therefore, she is okay to go out in public. So sure, it's a little bit selfish from my perspective, but really I feel along the same lines that the Prime Minister does, which is there are very few reasons why you wouldn't get vaccinated. And probably the only real reason why you shouldn't get vaccinated, the real reason I'm saying, trying to not be controversial, the only real reason why you wouldn't do it is if you are, if you are medically compromised, if you are medically unable to get that vaccine.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people who aren't religious who there was a couple of younger people on a panel the other week on the drum, and they were talking about the fact that they're just not going to get vaccinated, purely because there's just not a lot of information about it out there, that the long-term studies haven't been really shown to be effective and all that sort of stuff, nor can they be. So who knows what sort of
Well, there's even
things
fewer
again. But yeah,
studies
I don't know.
on the kids that got got various viruses that you could vaccinate against and died from it.
Yeah,
Very
and
few
that's the
studies on the long-term evidence for those kids' lives.
I suppose
Sorry.
it's an interesting discussion because I really thought, like, in my head, when it first started, you just think, all right, yes, of course I would get vaccinated. And it's interesting that some people have given it some really philosophical thought. Some people have given it some really deep thought. And it's maybe not as nuanced as what you might like to think. It's not so cut and dry. Even if you think it's cut and dry in your head, even if you think it's like, well, yes, you should definitely get vaccinated, maybe it's not so cut and dry for the rest of society, and it's really important that we sit down and have those discussions. So
Couldn't agree more. I think I think the best thing that people can do, because there's not a lot of information out there on a coronavirus vaccine at the moment, and that's because we don't have one. But I just really hope that in the future, when people are researching whether or not to go ahead and get that they are choosing their sources for vaccine information appropriately. Because that's what scares me most, is that you do have people who choose not to vaccinate because of misguided theories, poor information out there on the internet and through various sources. And I'm being very kind there. But I just hope that they listen to the right people, or moreover, if they've got the head for reading science-based articles or the actual papers themselves, go out and read them, because they contain important information, and moreover, they are very clear on what the the potential side effects of a vaccine or the potential detrimental sides of vaccines are. They don't go into the silly stuff, because there is so much bad information out there about vaccines. Sorry, I'm getting very, very preachy.
No, that's all right. We actually sort of missed a little bit at the beginning around who wrote this letter and what for.
Yes.
It was the Catholic. I'll get you to say it, because I might actually try and chop it into the beginning of the segment, if that's all right. So yeah, just tell us a bit about who actually wrote this letter, and how it came about, and yeah, we'll go from there.
Yeah, so 3 of Australia's leading religious voices have written to the Prime Minister with their concerns that the COVID-19 vaccine will be, quote, ethically tainted by aborted fetal cells. The Catholic Archbishop of Sydney, Anthony Fisher, Anglican Archbishop of Sydney, Glenn Davies, and Greek Orthodox Archbishop of Australia, Makarios. Yeah.
Makarios
Grenizakis,
yeah, nice work.
Raised concerns about the deal with AstraZeneca that would ensure Australians would be among the first in the world to receive the Oxford University COVID-19 vaccine if human trials are successful.
Yeah, okay. And they did end the letter by saying, please be assured that our chambers are not opposed to vaccination. As we have said, we are praying that one may be found. We also pray that it may be one that not be ethically tainted.
Yeah.
So we've spoken about dog whistling on the show, and I feel like that's a little bit of a dog whistle, isn't it? Because they're not explicitly saying, look, don't do it. They're just sort of saying, hey, this is, if you are a Catholic and have these thoughts, then you should have the option. So yeah, little bit of dog whistling going on there, I think. Now, Jake, proposed new powers seek to give the federal government the authority to regulate all agreements that state and territory governments, local councils, and public universities make with foreign nations. Thanks, Daniel Andrews. You've ruined it again.
Bloody did it again. Yeah. So did oh gosh, I can't remember the name of the premier for
constantly
Northern
coming
Territory.
Up with different rules for different countries.
Yeah, I know, right? Different times. How does he hit all of those countries?
Well, that's the thing. There's no in Russia, he's got no regulations for speed.
Yeah.
There's no health and safety regulations. So of course he gets it done quicker over there.
Yeah, yeah. Whereas Australia, around school zones, he's got to go 50, 40 even.
Well, that's the problem, right? It's 50 in
They're
Queensland.
not even in school at the time.
It's 50 in Queensland, but 40 in New South Wales.
Yeah.
Can't go around doing secret deals. And then Daniel Andrews comes along and says, hey, Santa, you can just come all year round.
Yeah, exactly. Come every day. And if you don't come,
yeah, I'm going to be cross. Yeah.
You're dead to us.
So, all these little secret deals with these foreign nations.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. So yes,
It is.
that was great. I quite enjoyed that. This is all around the premise that the Victorian government signed a memorandum of understanding around the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative or agreement that essentially China promised countries all around the world that they would pay for infrastructure projects for things like roads, etc., for things like bridges, etc., and multiple other things. If they were to be able to do other things, like it might open up trade. We build you a road, you give us a discount on, say, wine or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah.
So there are a whole bunch of economic opportunities that were opened by this Belt and Road Initiative, but it is one that has been heavily criticised by, well, a lot of commentators, both conservative and otherwise, around Australia, pretty well since the Memorandum of Understanding was signed. And the whole premise around this is that the federal government has said that they would put forward a new law in order to essentially review any new agreements like this that might be inconsistent with Australia's foreign policy. Essentially, the foreign minister would look at, as soon as the proposed laws were passed, they would look at the more than 130 deals and initiatives with over 30 different countries and would be able to terminate them. Essentially the federal government is saying, hey, look, we're doing these so that we can review them, so that we can make our essentially our foreign policy very clear, both with the states making those agreements with the individual countries, but also with the countries trying to make the agreements with the states. Because essentially, all of this responsibility has been devolved to the individual states. So as another example, I gave the Belt and Road Agreement, but the Northern Territory has a 99-year lease for the Darwin port with China. Heavily criticised, but 99 years. That is going to be leased out. Now, this is not one that is going to be, covered by these proposed laws whatsoever. But it is one of those things that in the future, the foreign minister could either terminate, if it came to that, but most importantly would be a part of the negotiations around those large contracts, or around any types of contracts that, might prevent us from being inconsistent with our foreign policy.
Yeah, and I know that Anthony Albanese is kind of a bit sort of wishy-washy in this situation too. I know he's come out sort of criticising it a little bit, but when asked about whether or not certain policies should be scrapped by the government, he's said that, look, it needs to be considered, it needs to be needs to be in the interest of the nation, all that sort of stuff. So it's interesting to see that there's not really tremendous commitment on either side. It might be one of those policies that sort of stick around even if Labor was to get into government for the next round.
Exactly. The Foreign Affairs spokeswoman, Penny Wong, said that the opposition would review the legislation before it decided on the position, but said, quote, the sort of powers that the government is talking about to override agreements that are counter to the national interest, of course, Labor would support that.
Yes, of course, Labor would support that. Of course they would, Jake.
Yeah.
Daniel Andrews. Hey?
It's a fun, it's not the only one. There are other ones with, over 30 countries, but there are trade agreements within states that, we might not perhaps agree with if they were brought to the fore.
Yes.
So yeah, there are some really wonky ones out there, but the initial one is this Belt and Road one, which frankly speaking, it's probably not a bad one. But it's one that comes up during a time where we are not particularly in we're not on speaking terms so well with China at the moment.
No, there's certainly a lot going on there, and there's certainly a lot of blatant sort of comments from political from politicians now, basically saying that China's interfering in our trade, explicitly, and it's just what's happening.
Yeah.
And why wouldn't they, Jake?
Exactly.
Why wouldn't they? If I was China, I'd probably do the same thing now. Wouldn't do that. guys in China. That'd be nice to Australians. Speaking of being nice to Australians, Jake, this weekend, one of my favorite YouTubers has a deliberate policy of not mentioning names for terrorists, so I think we should follow that same line. However,
yes.
this week...
I've done so.
Yes, exactly. I saw that. And I just thought, well, he either hasn't done his research or he's leaving it out of the script deliberately. So I thought, yes, we're leaving it out of the script. This week, we had the terrorist responsible for the killing of, I think, 50 50 people in Christchurch, sentenced over there to life imprisonment, which I thought was I think that's the highest one that New Zealander can get.
First one in, I believe it's ever. But
okay.
I heard a couple of other commentators talking about another person who also got life in prison. But this was major. First one that I could find.
And this is the highest, the longest sentence that a person can be given. Is it only one life sentence, or is life sentence in New Zealand like life?
I believe it's life. So life means a different thing in different countries. So,
yes.
For example, in the US, life is 25 years. And
right.
You can get multiple life sentences that add up to 25 plus 25, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
But, yeah, look, I am not sure in New Zealand it might actually be for the duration of the individual's life.
Yeah, let me have a look. I've got it here. I've got life imprisonment has the most severe criminal sentence in New Zealand since the death penalty was abolished in 1989, having not been applied since 1957. Offenders sentenced to life imprisonment must serve a minimum of 10 years imprisonment before they are eligible for parole, but he doesn't have...
No, he is not eligible for
parole. Although the sentencing judge may set a longer minimum period or no minimum period at all, i.e. life without parole, released offenders remain on parole and are subject to life imprisonment in New Zealand for 2 other crimes. It doesn't actually say.
Yeah, so
this is the Wikipedia article.
It sounds very much like indefinite.
Yeah.
And there will probably be some, discussion later on in life, particularly if they're able to de-radicalize this individual. But it is very interesting because, of course, and we've talked about this on the show a couple of times before, Australia has these deportation laws that essentially mean that if you commit a serious crime here in Australia and you're from another country, you will be deported to a country of origin. And, of course, Australia has done this with a great number of countries in the past, but most notably with New Zealand, who has a great issue with the deportation. And you can kind of understand that in some cases, but this is one of those things that we would deport countries, and I should say New Zealand doesn't really have that. I'm sure that those laws exist, but they don't actually do it in practice.
No, there's a segment on the Wikipedia article which says longest minimum periods of imprisonment. Before this character here, there was another character, character 2, who had a length of 30 years. He murdered 3 people and attempted the murder of a 4th during an armed robbery. He was initially jailed for a minimum period of 33 years, which was reduced by 3 years on appeal. The character who got the monster, I should say, who got sentenced this week, it just says length, no parole. So it looks like he's just in there, indefinitely. So now this is about a deal, though. Yes.
Well, it's less about a deal and more about an appeal. So there's that rhymed and it didn't mean it didn't.
Yeah, I'll write that down.
It was less about a deal and more about an appeal. So the deputy prime minister, no, he's the foreign minister, and I think he's also the deputy for deputy prime minister for New Zealand.
Wacky New Zealand.
Winston Peters rather.
Oh, yeah.
He has said that during the sentencing, some victims' families requested that he be sent back to his home country, and essentially Winston Peters suggested that it would be fair and logical that the gunman be removed from the country. And part of this is because over the lifetime of this individual, it is going to cost around $90 million New Zealand dollars in order to imprison this person. It's around $5,000 per day at the moment, and part of this is because he is secluded within a very high security prison. So, he is requiring extra security. He's requiring, extra space, etc. So it's one of those things that should should in fact that cost be imposed on Australia instead of on New Zealand? But it's such an interesting question. We don't have any laws that would allow a prisoner swap with
Right.
New Zealand.
Do we have any history about it?
Well, we do with other countries, but not with
New Zealand.
Not with New Zealand. And
Okay.
interestingly, we actually do in Australia. We I can't remember the name of the thing, but there's a European process that enables prisoner swapping. New Zealand actually has a really bad history with sending people convicted of crimes on their soil and in fact of terrorism charges on their soil. There was the case of, I think it was in the 1970s, of a bunch of French spies that infiltrated New Zealand and bombed the Greenpeace Rainbow Warrior, killing a few people. And they were sentenced in New Zealand, and the French government, appealed to them, said, this is ridiculous, we're not going to let you land in any ports. So New Zealand commuted the sentences of the French spies and sent them to a Polynesian French-owned colony with, under essentially the agreement that they would spend the remainder of their sentences on that Polynesian island. And the French just went and picked them up, brought them home, and gave them a very warm welcome, a parade, in fact, when they returned. New Zealand are right to be a little bit hesitant. Of course, we're quite close, and it does make sense that we would have a prisoner swap agreement for certain circumstances. But the prisoner swap agreement that Australia has currently under this European process requires that the prisoner themselves, once the government's agreed to swap the prisoners, essentially it requires the prisoner themselves to ask to be relocated to their country of origin. So, and there's no telling whatsoever what this individual would do. He's clearly not, I don't know. I don't want to go into the psychology of the guy, but it's one of those things. You just don't know what is on his mind. It's probably really highly appropriate to be, having him in such high and heavy seclusion, so that because he's been the poster child on far right, and neo-Nazi type sites because of what he did, which is reprehensible, despicable, absolutely despicable. So he should not be able to share notes, for example, to share things with other people within the prison system. And you certainly don't want to give him access to radicalize other individuals within the prison system. So yeah, look, there's no easy answer here. But the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, has left the door open to working with New Zealand on the issue. But there are a lot of, regulatory, legal hurdles that have to be overcome if that happens.
And this certainly comes off the back of the other deal that we have with New Zealand, which they're not too happy with anyway, is the idea that if you have a New Zealander in Australia and they're a resident of Australia and they commit a crime, then once they've finished serving out that time in jail, they get shipped off back to New Zealand. And Jacinda's none too happy with that particular situation. I don't know. Did we hear from Jacinda about what her actual views are on this, or
no?
Do we know?
We didn't. I mean, all of her rhetoric this week, quite rightly, you would expect for a prime minister addressing this type of offence and these types of crimes. She also doesn't mention the name. She, in a speech this week, she said essentially this should be the last time that we hear the name of this terrorist.
Yeah.
Should be gone, essentially. But all of her rhetoric has been around let's heal. We don't want to talk about this dude anymore. Let's just move on. Behind closed doors, not sure, but yeah, we'll just have to see. This might be something that we
You don't have your insiders on the job, Jake. You don't have your.
I don't. I have very few New Zealand insiders. I do call some New Zealanders moles, but
I don't know what a New Zealand equivalent to a mole is. I don't think they Kiwi. I don't know. Anyway, yes, absolutely tragic affair, and hearing some of those victim speeches over the last couple of days has just been horrific. Really bringing to light the humanity of the situation and the lack of humanity of the situation too. Just that monster's complete lack of empathy is bewildering, to say the least. And I'm glad that those victim speeches exist, because to have that moment of being heard and having that cathartic moment to get everything that you needed to say off your chest. Not only that, but consolidating your thoughts to be able to give a speech like that as well. To be able to go, how do I actually feel, however long on, and what sort of things would I say if I could say them, and then having an opportunity to say them. I think hopefully that gives the victims' families some consolation, I guess, in the sense of being consoled.
Yeah. Agree.
Cool. Now, Jake, we did get an email from Fred Stokes a little while ago. We got an email from Fred Stokes a little while ago, and he messaged me again, and he said, "Look, I'd like you to give it a crack. I'd like you to give it a crack at having some comments about his email." Now, his email is he wanted us to revisit it. He's a very dedicated listener to the show, so hats off to you.
We appreciate that. Thank you, sir.
Sir Fred Stokes, you are officially knighted on behalf of the Pouch the Podcast. Really, the gist of the email is about the fact that he would judge politicians on their behaviour and not necessarily their party allegiance. The idea that he said that packages announced lately have been impressive, and Morrison's new willingness to drag in opposing ideas should be praised. I guess he's talking about the cabinet that's been formed. He seems to put aside some of his strongest political instincts. His communication has changed, has brought in opposing views, and the obvious public disagreements with the states has stopped. The transparency and clarity of language has improved dramatically. It has lowered my anxiety towards the handling of the situation, and you can notice that mood shift in the public and the media. There are clear issues and confusion about the packages, but that has to be expected, and now I feel that these will be worked out. He is quite possibly making the best decisions that could be made in the situation, but his natural tendency for secrecy, politically based policy making, and his refusal to ever answer even simple questions he dislikes does not lead to trust. I do not agree with the view we should put aside previous behaviour of government and lower the criticism due to the gravity of the situation. They have not given any reason to trust their judgment. Sports rorts, robo-debt, bushfire crisis. I think the huge consequences are why we need to be more critical and aware of past behaviour. He said he's followed Australian politics as a hobby for a decade. His biggest fear was always that if we had a government with such a lack of talent in power during an actual crisis. Little did I know the bushfires were just a preview. I really hope to be wrong, and current signs are promising, but until the recovery is over, it is essential that we approach these things with a critical mind. It's also very important to record the rapid changes as they are happening and our opinions towards them. Memories will compress time and muddy the details, and that makes it easy to confuse or manipulate the historical narrative. He considers podcasts like ours, Jake, critical to this conversation. He did want us to address a few things. I didn't. His email goes on for quite some time. I think that the general gist is that he really wants to base his opinions on the actions of the government rather than just the things that they're saying. Now, I couldn't agree with this more. He wants us to give it a little opinion about this, Jake. So this is my view on this situation. My view on this situation is, yes, I couldn't agree more. However, you need to, with the idea that we actually judge them on their actions, that being the case, there's no real government body that's free from those sorts of mistakes and free from that sort of corruption. There's no perfect political party. There's no perfect political system that's free from those corruptions. The coronavirus response has obviously given Scott Morrison and the coalition a chance to reboot themselves after the dramatic failings of the bushfire crisis and the way that he handled that situation, or the way that the Liberals and the coalition handled that situation. It has given them some respite. I did comment this week about Daniel Andrews and how he's certainly got a little bit of a shine about him at the moment, but it'll be interesting to see how history remembers him once that shine has been worn off. I feel the same sort of way about Scott Morrison, in the sense that he's got a little bit of a shine about him at the moment, and you can feel that shine is wearing off. You can feel, especially with the aged care sector, whether that shine is wearing off. Now, you have to basically decide what are the important issues for you. If corruption is important for you, then okay, maybe politics isn't your game, isn't it? Anyway, but is education important to you? What are the actual policies? Like, dig down to those policies. I think we focus far too much on on the idea that politicians need to be perfect and that they need to be following through on all these, perfect projections that we put on them. I just can't see that as being a realistic expectation. The question is, what are the policies that matter to you? Is it education? Is it health? Is it tax? Is it, whatever it is? Is it aged care at the moment? Is it the coronavirus response? Is it the bushfire response? What are those things that matter to you? And what are the policies based on that? And how accurate do the politicians actually follow through on those policies? Even to the point where I sort of felt a bit bad for the aged care minister this week when he fumbled in his little, things. He did say that I would find those numbers, all that sort of stuff. However, if aged care response is important to you, which it should be, and it is to me, then I would expect the aged care minister to actually have those numbers. I would expect him to be actually following through on that. If it's an honest mistake, if it's something that that he does, I guess I'm talking about things like the shaking of the hands, like Scott Morrison shaking of hands and sort of grabbing someone's hand and all that sort of stuff. For me, it was just a bit of an awkward moment that he handled very, very poorly. Now, that shaking of hands is not important to me, right? That's not an important political or policy thing that Liberals run on how they shake hands. Does it show part of his character? Absolutely. But what do I actually want from a leader who's actually going to follow through on these particular policies? I think Scott Morrison particularly does a pretty interesting job of the fact that he actually apologises for some things. He apologised for some of the bushfire responses. He's apologised for some of the aged care things. The question is he apologising for those right sort of things? Anyway, that's my view. I've tried to talk a lot, Jake, to let you gather your thoughts. Go.
Yeah, look, I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's really interesting, the things that Fred mentions about, for example, Scott Morrison around his, never completely answers a question, quite often rejects the premise of a question in order to not answer it, obfuscates, it doesn't adequately respond to things like corruption around, pork barreling, etc. I think that's probably what makes him an incredibly successful Prime Minister. And it's probably why he will remain Prime Minister for some time. I think actually he's garnered a lot of, unless something, I hesitate to say.
You're calling it, Jake. You're calling the next election.
Well, I think it would be, unless something huge happens, and I don't necessarily want to say that because a lot of huge stuff has happened since the last. Yeah. But unless something huge happens, like I think he has garnered a huge amount of good political will, thanks to the response to coronavirus. Now, you could absolutely argue that he did a lot of things wrong, or that his party did a lot of things wrong, or too late, too lenient, and then not lenient enough, and then lots of backflipping. But that is the nature of these types of events. You do need to be agile, think on your feet with the best evidence at hand, and it's something that he appears to do relatively well. Were the bushfires handled well? No. At
a federal level, yeah.
At a federal level, I mean, it's a technicality, and he was technically right. But when he said this is a state issue and the federal government has not gotten involved in the past, it was a bit of a lie. Federal government has gotten involved in bushfires, particularly ones that crossed boundaries in the past, and was very quick to provide leadership assistance, extra feet on the ground, etc. Look. He didn't do so well in his specific response to the bushfires, but I think broadly speaking, he's largely redeemed himself, particularly in the eyes of the public. But this is the nature of politics. It's never the same thing 2 days in a row. Last week we had issues with the aged care minister. This week we had less issues with the aged care minister because he wasn't front and centre, because the Prime Minister recognised that there was an issue with him fronting the media and fronting the Senate. And, essentially this week we heard and saw very little of him. Yeah, so this is we have a powerful strategic and tactical leader. Doesn't always hit the mark, but invariably, this is the nature of good politicians. You don't necessarily measure good politicians by the good things that they enact, by the good social policies that they enact, or by the good education policies that they enact. It's how savvily, how well they manage their cabinet, how well they manage the personalities in the backbench, how well they manage the dialogue between the public and the Prime Minister and indeed the federal government themselves. So, this is the nature of things. Broadly speaking, Fred, I completely agree with just about everything that you said, as I agree with just about everything that Greg said. But it is, it's the nature of things. Politicians are unpredictable, but sometimes, we get a rare egg in somebody who is incredibly savvy with the media. And someone who is able to lead from in front, like Scott Morrison. So there's lots of stuff. I can say this enough. I can say this plenty of times. Lots of stuff that's great in this current government. Lots of stuff that isn't great in this current government. But invariably, it's very difficult to fault the strategy since coronavirus.
Yeah, and if I can drag the US politics side of things into it a little bit, I think Australian and maybe even particularly more left-leaning people, or I suppose if you have a personality trait which leans towards empathy, I should say, we kind of like the idea of having a leader who's a little bit like a Barack Obama, someone who can speak really well and someone who's tremendously empathetic and someone who can just, speak about their policies so well and speak about tragedy so well. Scott Morrison is not that character for this country. He is not the character who's going to be inspirational. When you hear him speak about how much he loves his family, how much he loves Australia, how much he loves his country, it's not, you can tell it's genuine, but it's not some stirring speech that, but it's genuine. And it's like, well, it just he's not one to rouse the country around a love for family and a love for whatever it is that he's talking about. It's
I would say, except when he's shaming us. Stop
it. Yeah. I suppose that's the thing. The real question is not necessarily what do you think you want in a leader, but what is actually a good leader? And is Scott Morrison actually objectively a good leader, or is he not? I mean, what does the science say? What does it, in this particular situation, in a crisis, how far does charisma get you? How far does that ability to articulate your thoughts in a stirring and inspirational way get you? As far as I can tell, he can articulate his thoughts quite well. It's just not a particularly, rousing, let's all rally around a particular idea type situation. But economically, we've done pretty well. Health-wise, give or take the aged care situation, we've done pretty well. Communication-wise, we've done pretty well, and that's evidenced clearly because we're running the experiment in every other country around the world at the moment. So it's easy to compare ourselves to something else because we've got all sorts of experiments running about how to deal with this situation. Yeah. But, I think you're right. Public sentiment would be high at the moment in terms of how well we think we've handled the situation. And maybe people are surprised by that because they thought that he would bungle the whole thing because he's not a particularly inspirational or charismatic individual. So
no, he's a command and control guy. And frankly, he seems to... he seems to have that in the bag relatively well. You ministers, here is your policy. I'm going to sit you down with these policy advisors. You're going to learn the policy. Then you're going to, direct it to your departments. And then we're going to get in front of the media and we're going to say what we're going to do. He is a command and control kind of guy. And it seems to work, or at least has seemed to have worked in the recent past. I don't know. Broadly speaking, like I'm not really a factional guy. I'm not really a left or a right kind of guy. I'm pretty damn centrist most of the time, and I swing from party to party based on the election. Based on normally the policy. Our current Prime Minister, our current federal government is not necessarily a policy-based government. They were broadly elected on the we're not those guys. Platform, so that they didn't bring a huge amount to the policy table at the last election, and they've certainly accomplished that. I mean, we've had plenty of policy over the course of the of this government, but invariably that's been reactionary to the social, economic, virus, etc. Forces that have been going on around us. So we got what we got, and what we got is potentially better than the other guys, but you'll never know.
Yeah. And look, Fred is involved in the comments section, and he did say that, he's certainly not interested in that empathy side of things as much as he is in hardcore policy. His email does state that he can point out some clear hypocrisies of the Scott Morrison-led coalition, in the sense that they've attacked Labor since 2013 on national security and economic credentials, for example, stopping the boats, debt and deficit disaster, and the climate tax. He goes on to say that debt has doubled since 2013, when Labor was last in power. Without a GFC, Australia's gross and net debt is low by most world standards. They didn't stop the Ruby Princess. They're now rushing out stimulus package in response to a disaster. The climate tax was not a tax, and since being removed, electricity prices have kept increasing. These attacks, he's suggesting that the attacks on Labor aren't necessarily warranted. So we should stress that Fred does value the idea of hardcore policy and how the governments enact those as well. Fred, we might, with your permission, post this this well-rounded response to the Pouch Podcast on our Facebook page, so that other people might be able to comment and start a discussion there. Let us know what you think about that, Fred. Jake.
No, my name isn't Fred, Jake.
It is now. It's in the book.
It's in the book. I love it.
It's in the book.
Along
all right.
with the, what was it? The something water pistol.
The dripping water pistol.
Dripping water pistol. Yep.
We don't have a smoking gun. We have a dripping water pistol.
Yep.
Now, I don't know. This is a hyper extended edition, 1.5 hours.
I reckon. Far out.
2
episodes, maybe.
Maybe. Yeah, let's do it. Let's not edit it and just release it as a dual bad boy, because I don't know if I can sit through that again. All right, no worries. Jake, but once our listeners have, I don't know what they've done today. What have they done today?
Digested the podcast.
Yeah, once they've really sat through these 2 episodes of the Pouch Podcast, what would you like them to do?
I'd love them to subscribe and then rate and review us. That would be great, because rating and reviewing helps other people to find us.
It sure does. And we've started to appear down the bottom of, things you might like, other podcasts you might like on the Apple Podcasts page. So thank you to those people who have come to us from the Aussie English. Thank you from the people who have come to us from Politics Over Coffee. Those crossovers are obviously helping, because we're starting to get suggested down there as well. Thank you to the 50,000 people who have downloaded us this week. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you to the 50,000 people who thought about downloading us this week.
Yeah.
And
thoughts count.
And yeah, absolutely. And Jake, if they want to share the love, they can do so by telling their friends, families, and foes to head to thepouchofpodcast.com, where those people can choose their favorite podcast player of choice and subscribe that way.
I should hope that they do.
Is it Monday now?
It's just about Monday.
I
still have painting to do. So
I'm surprised it says 12 p.m. on my clock.
Holy moly, it does too.
After that thing, I was waiting for 12 a.m. to be honest with you.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, and for those of you paying attention, I will continuously work on my backdrop. We've evolved from plants to a tool poster, and we'll be doing an IKEA shop before too long, so that I can look like a stock standard YouTuber.
As I've often said, Greg, you are such a tool.
Absolutely, as evidenced by my giant tool poster. Now,
I love it.
I'll chat to you during the week, and look forward to doing another show with you this time. Same bat channel, same bat time.
Yeah, except one day earlier.
Yes, on the Saturday. Oh, do you want to let out? Do you want to do a spiel? Yeah,
we can do a spiel. Yeah,
Go.
Well, so I started a podcast 100 years ago with Greg. Called The Imaginary Friends, and he's gone through many different turns and name changes over the time, and it's now just the iFriends. and we will be resurrecting it. I've put it on hiatus for a couple of months while various things occurred, including getting this podcast up and running. But resurrecting it,
working on your background, you've really changed it over time, Jake. That whiteboard.
No. I never change. Actually, I've got the same exercises on there that I did when the quarantine started. I still do the exercises, but it doesn't matter. I haven't changed them up. I'm a routine kind of guy. But yes, we're resurrecting it this next week. Won't be the same schedule as I previously had it, so it'll be probably 1 to 2 episodes a month maximum. But do join us next week. You can look it up by going to your podcast player of choice and searching for iFriends, and it should be there. And if it's not, and you're on a podcast aggregator that I'm not aware of, please do tell me by emailing Greg. Because I don't have an email address associated with it.
Yeah, look, no, yeah. So search for iFriends. Really looking forward to that one. It's a bit like a quiz show, isn't it, Jake?
It is absolutely a bit. It's a lot like a quiz. I'd say it's a quiz show.
It's more like worldwide news and politics, not so seriously.
Correct. That's exactly right. I love the catchphrase. That's in there now.
Well, I look forward to having a bit less pressure to talk so much as well.
Me too. Oh, wait, that doesn't work for me.
All right. Well, you've got my Skype number, Jake. So anytime I'll make myself available to you, my friend. Thank you for committing to the pouch over the last few months and while we get a routine.
Committed, Greg.
Well, just while we get a routine up. Yeah. You didn't let me finish, Jake. God.
Constantly interrupting me.
All right. See you, man.
See ya.
I don't know where the finish button is on the Facebook live stream.
I really like that song.
So we are still going because I don't know how to finish it.
I'll do a dance. There we go.
Finish it. How do you end a live stream on Facebook? Who knows? Who knows? Who knows? There's just like you would think it would just have a big red end button.
Complete.
I have an edit button and I have a cancel button, so I can edit it, which is good. I can edit it to say
classic cancel culture, right?
I can edit it to say that I should have cancelled it. I don't know how to cancel this, Jake. Who knows? We're just going to go on forever. This is the
show that doesn't
end. It just goes up. Oh, dear. All right. Well, anyway, what if I press finish on here and...